MSW Media. Please join me in thanking our new sponsor, Home Chef. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering you 18 free meals plus free dessert for life. And of course, free shipping on your first box. Go to homechef.com/cleanup.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's cleanup on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be cleanup on aisle 45.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 197 of Cleanup on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok. We have a lot to cover today, including big losses in court for Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, the Georgia fraudulent electors, Jeffrey Clark, the state of Florida, and Rudy Giuliani.
Wow, it's Benchslap Wednesday here on Cleanup on Aisle 45. And we have a letter from Congressional Democrats to urge the Department of Justice to appoint a special counsel to investigate Kushner for FARA violations. But first, it is Hall of Fame Day on Cleanup on Aisle 45. So thanks to all of our Hall of Fame patrons, including Jason Berzoska. Please don't read this on the pod. We don't need a call out. Thanks for what you do. Kimberly D. Stephen, Rose Flaherty, Anonymous Buddy. Would you say I had a plethora of MFers? Fran Reichenbach, Jens Eelstrup Rasmussen, Dr. David, Greg Kreimer, Mr. Stu Pedasso, Suzanne Ashworth, Steve Towell, and Patty B. Thank you so much. We couldn't do this without you. If you want to become a patron of Cleanup on Aisle 45 and get these episodes ad-free and early, you can do so by going to patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's AISLE 45POD. And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the fascist rally held this weekend by Donald Trump. And of course, I think the thing that's sticking out the most to people is comedian, and I put that in quotes, Tony Hinchcliffe, who is the host of the Kill Tony podcast. And he basically disparaged everybody. I mean, he went after Puerto Ricans, Latinos. He went after Muslims, Palestinians, Jews, and Black people, saying that they were carving watermelons for Halloween. And I mean, all of his extremely racist jokes went pretty viral and have pissed off a lot of people. And you know, I just gotta reiterate for Tony, if you're listening, the golden rule of comedy is to not punch down. You can't punch down. The idea of comedy as a free speech art form is to punch up at the man, not to become the man and punch down. So I don't know. It was pretty awful, Pete.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, look, it was not only did he insult so many groups of people, apparently there's some reporting that the campaign, in reviewing his proposed script, he planned on calling Harris the C word, and they said, oh, you got to take that out. So everything else apparently was fine. Mm-hmm. And then another detail, at least I saw Jacqueline Sweet tweeting about this, but others as well. I think there's a Mediaite report that none other than Joe Rogan suggested that Trump hire him to, quote unquote, write bangers for the campaign way back in August. So it's working out real well. I mean, I saw Harris already had it in a campaign video talking about just Trump's general treatment of Puerto Ricans in particular in response to Hurricane Maria, back when he was shooting hoops with paper towels to the crowd to show his magnanimous nature and, otherwise ignoring the island. But, as repulsive as it is, it's pretty clear that's exactly what you're getting.
Yeah,
In Fox News, they had they had, I forget her name, one of the campaign spokesmen. She was there, and they said, well, she said, the crowd didn't seem to mind the joke. It's like, well, yes, exactly. That's exactly the point. Very, very well said. That is
he
exactly
actually bombed. Somebody, I think, replied to him on Twitter and was like, man, you told racist jokes to a racist audience and you still bombed. In response, some very prominent Puerto Ricans, Bad Bunny, Ricky Martin, J-Lo, have all endorsed to their 315 million social media followers Kamala Harris, and have, taken obviously issue with what Tony Hinchcliffe said. So I think that this was a quite, usually the October surprise comes from the opposition, but I think they've done it to themselves. We'll see if this actually moves anybody. I mean, I feel like there might be a ton of voters out there who weren't otherwise going to vote, who will now vote. It's not going to move any of his MAGA base off of him,
Yeah, or hopefully there might be. I still have some hope too. Some people who would otherwise vote for Trump might be so disgusted that they say, you know what, I'm not even going to bother going. I'm not going to waste my time voting. So, voting for Harris is better number wise than not voting for Trump. But if it has an impact. And again, all of these insulting Muslims, insulting Puerto Ricans, insulting all the key demographics he needs in every swing state a week before the election, it is
can't help.
Sadly, not surprising. Can't help himself.
Can't help. All right. In the name of saving Rudy for last, which we kind of like to do on this show, otherwise we would start with that. That's the big news. But let's start with one of my favorite stories from the week. This is from Kyle Cheney over at Politico. A highly unusual ultimatum from a frustrated judge caused House Republican investigators to postpone their demand for testimony from two DOJ tax attorneys in a probe of Hunter Biden's finances. Quote, I'm willing to bet everything I own, plus my dog Scout, that these two line attorneys are going to have zero information to confirm your suspicion. That was U.S. District Judge Anna Reyes speaking to a lawyer representing the House Republicans on Wednesday. Reyes threatened to order Attorney General Merrick Garland and House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan to show up to her courtroom next week for legal arguments on the dispute if they didn't figure out how to stop this. She says, don't test me on this. I'm not bluffing. By the way, she's an appointee of Joe Biden, who is often seen around the federal courthouse with her golden retriever, comes to work with her. I love that.
Now, the fight emerged from House Republicans' long-running search for evidence that the White House exerted political pressure on officials who investigated the younger Biden's failure to pay income taxes. As part of that inquiry, the House Judiciary Committee tried to obtain testimony from two Justice Department tax lawyers who worked on the case. When the Justice Department resisted the House GOP subpoenas to the two lawyers, the fight ended up before Reyes, who has been refereeing the dispute for months with increasing exasperation. During a 2-hour hearing on Wednesday, she pressed lawyers for both sides to punt the dispute until next year. They refused, she said, she would summon their bosses into court. After a brief recess, the House's top lawyer, Matthew Berry, and veteran Justice Department lawyer Elizabeth Shapiro told the judge they had agreed to shelve the matter until early next year. By that point, a new Congress and a new president will have been sworn in. Developments likely to diminish both sides' appetite for a fight linked to an all but defunct effort to impeach Joe Biden. Oh,
so it's over. Now, here's some background. Hunter Biden pled guilty to tax evasion last month and is scheduled to be sentenced in December. But that's not enough for Jim Jordan. He wants to know why he wasn't, charged with more crimes. The White House and the Justice Department have staunchly denied any political interference in the cases involving the president's son, and Hunter Biden's lawyers have argued that he was actually treated overly harshly as a result of political pressure from Republicans. Now, Wednesday's hearing on the subpoena fight was perhaps most notable for the furious tongue lashing that Reyes delivered to both sides over their handling on the matter. It was a follow-up to a similarly brutal bench slap she dealt out in the same case in April. The judge took particular umbrage with the House's insistence that the two subpoenaed career attorneys would have any information relevant to the Judiciary Committee's inquiry. And in one memorable exchange, Reyes appeared to get Berry to acknowledge that Jim Jordan's decision in 2022 to blow off a subpoena from the House January 6 Select Committee was based on flimsy premises. Reyes baited Barry by asking whether it would be acceptable for the Justice Department to refuse to comply with a House subpoena over concerns about testimony being politicized or misrepresented.
Yeah. And then after Barry roundly rejected those excuses as unacceptable, Reyes said she had quoted them directly from a letter Jordan had written refusing to comply with the subpoena the January 6th committee issued to the Ohio lawmaker for his testimony. Quote, "Both sides here are being beyond hypocritical," Reyes said. "You all are abusing the court system, and abusing my time. This is not acceptable." Barry recognized the trap Reyes laid and emphasized that while he was representing Jordan in this particular fight, he also represents the House more broadly and has to stand up for institutional prerogatives.
So, yeah, that was pretty hypocritical, Judge. You're right. But I'm really here for just the House in general. So the Justice Department has argued that its so-called line attorneys shouldn't be subject to questioning from congressional committees because that would intrude on executive branch deliberations. Shapiro also noted the DOJ made various other people involved in the Hunter Biden case available for questioning, including special counsel David Weiss and other top officials and FBI agents. But Reyes expressed irritation that the negotiations broke down over whether DOJ attorneys representing the subpoenaed lawyers could be in the room when they were questioned. Quote, "The separation of powers concern is way overblown," the judge said. "Democracy is not going to come falling down in shambles because two attorneys are outside of the door instead of inside of the door for a deposition. I think that's insanity and ridiculous and laughable as an argument."
Yeah, Reyes also skewered the Justice Department for hypocrisy, for instructing the two career lawyers not to show up for their House depositions, while successfully prosecuting two former Donald Trump aides, Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, on contempt charges for defying subpoenas from the January 6th committee in the last Congress. Working from a tally she ordered both sides to give her, Reyes complained that the subpoena litigation had cost taxpayers $1.1 million and counting. And, you know, that's a ton of money. I think a little bit her criticism, I don't know the whole record. I'm reading only this reporting, but it strikes me eminently reasonable if I'm a DOJ attorney that is being subpoenaed to come and provide testimony, something that is rarely done with lower level officials, certainly in DOJ and the FBI. And if I want to have DOJ attorneys in the room with me, I don't really see a problem with saying we want the attorneys in there versus no, you can't have an attorney. Now, it's not clear to me if they can have personal attorneys and just not the DOJ attorneys. And I think there's a little bit of a difference between DOJ attorneys who are clearly government employees doing government work compared to Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, who, as we've talked about time and time again, unlike Mark Meadows, who was successfully able to quash the subpoena based on separation of powers concerns, part of the argument about Navarro and Bannon is like they're not and they weren't government employees. At least Navarro, for the stuff at the time of his, the topic for his testimony, was not in the government. So I think there is a little bit of difference to be drawn. I appreciate the judge kind of like trying to get everybody to come to their senses and arrive apparently at the right answer to push this until after the election and likely inauguration. But I don't know. It's all silliness.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with you. I think the Department of Justice is right to point out a separation of powers issue. But I mean, also the judge is saying that these two guys aren't going to they're not going to give you what you want. So like, this is just all ridiculous and you're wasting my time and you're wasting the court's time. And yeah, I think that the bench slap was quite a bit harder on the House Republicans than it was on the Department of Justice in this particular case. Because, I mean, that's what, the DOJ, these two line prosecutors could have sued to block the subpoenas, but they didn't, right? And so it's a little bit different than Navarro and Bannon in that sense, or even Jim Jordan himself, or any other number of people who tried to get out of the subpoenas for the January 6th Select Committee. So I guess they're wasting time, but they could be wasting a lot more time, and they're not. So at least there's that, and I would acknowledge that. But the whole impeach Joe Biden thing is definitely a waste of time. So it's been punted to till next year, which means it's going to go away if we flip the House.
100%.
Yep, we have more news to get to, but we have to take a quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, it's AG from Cleanup on Aisle 45. Dinner can feel like a real chore after a long, busy day or a long, busy week or a long, busy election season. Trying to come up with a recipe, gather all the ingredients, put it all together in a meal can be exhausting. And that's why I'm all about Home Chef. With fresh, pre-portioned meals ready to go, I simply pick a meal from the fridge, follow the simple steps, and dinner is pretty much done. Home Chef has completely turned dinner time into something I actually look forward to. It's easy, fun, and it's always delicious. Home Chef makes it really easy and saves you money for a limited time. Home Chef is offering you 18 free meals plus free dessert for life. And of course, free shipping on your first box. Just go to homechef.com/cleanup. Now, I'm always impressed by Home Chef, but the pesto crusted bruschetta trout with buttered broccoli blew me away from start to finish. Took less than 20 minutes to make, and the end result was absolutely delicious. The pesto and panko crust on the trout added the perfect crunch, while the fresh Roma tomatoes and green onions gave it a light, zesty finish. It was delicious. It looked beautiful. It plated lovely. The buttered broccoli was great, simple, satisfying. I'm going to make this one again. Home Chef makes mealtime easy, no matter what kind of day I've had or week I've had, with options ranging from classic meal kits with simple pre-portioned ingredients, speedy recipes ready in under 30 minutes, and even microwavable meals that are delicious. Home Chef has the whole family covered. Plus, there are over 30 recipes to choose from each week, including kid-friendly family menus with 18 new picky eater-approved options. And not only is it convenient, but Home Chef also helps save on groceries. Customers report saving an average of $86 a month. So for a limited time, Home Chef is offering listeners 18 free meals plus free dessert for life. And of course, free shipping on your first box. Go to homechef.com/cleanup. That's homechef.com/cleanup for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. You heard that right. Homechef.com/cleanup. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
Hey, welcome back. We have more Hall of Fame patrons to thank, including Maris Lawson, Christine Tackner, David Chandler, at Dirt Road Dems, Berta 5078, Chris McCullough, Star Lanus, Catherine Gilbert White is totally awesome at her job, Karen Sherman, Triple G, Sharon Tukolsky, Je suis fatigué, Roberta Reed, and Tiffany Trump was adopted. Thank all of you so much. Thank you for supporting independent media. You will never have us like Jeff Bezos not endorsing somebody or not bringing you the news for fear of what Trump may do to us. So all the more
we endorse Kamala Harris and Tim Walz
wholeheartedly. So thank you for your support of
in case you were wondering.
Media. Yeah, in case you were wondering whether or not it's a good idea to have a oligarch tech bro, the private owner of a national major newspaper, the answer is no. It's not a good idea at all. But nevertheless, thank you for your support. Now more than ever, important to get your news from local media, from voices you can trust. So with that, that was Jim Jordan's embarrassing day in court. So let's move on to Mark Meadows. Back in June, Politico had reported that Mark Meadows had been quietly fighting a months-long battle to obtain thousands of records from his time in the White House, a bid to aid his defense against criminal charges in Georgia. Court filings back then showed that Meadows, with the backing of Georgia Judge Scott McAfee, had been pressuring the National Archives and Special Counsel Jack Smith since May to turn over massive troves of phone records, emails, text messages, and other documents from his time as Trump's top aide in the White House. Well, this week, Judge Timothy Kelly, who's a Trump appointee, tossed Meadows' bid. Kelly ruled on Tuesday that Meadows' effort, which he initially brought in a local D.C. court but was transferred to federal court, was flawed from the start. Though Judge McAfee had authorized Meadows to pursue the records, Kelly noted that state courts rarely have authority over action taken against a federal agency. Quote, "The court cannot bypass this jurisdictional defect," he said.
So, Mark Meadows, you're a jurisdictional defect.
Yeah. Best that might be said about him. Not surprising, again, and it's just, when people gripe and complain about, why do things take so long? It takes so long because you have all kinds of defendants doing crap like this, and it just takes time to, the right result takes time to be briefed and heard and considered by a judge, and now remanded back down. So, Mark, you lose, but the fact of the matter is now we're in, November, essentially almost, and Mark Meadows has yet to go to trial anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And I think I had a little rant about this last week. I was pretty upset. All right. So that's Jim Jordan's Benchslap and Meadows Benchslap. Next up, the Georgia fraudulent electors. Remember these guys? For a while now, they've been trying to get their case removed to federal court from Georgia state court, saying that as electors, we are federal officers, and as such, we should be represented by the Department of Justice in a federal court. Well, Judge Rosenbaum from the 11th Circuit, the court that rejected Meadows' bid to move his case to federal court, wrote the following. First, under the Constitution, federal law, and the laws of Georgia, defendants were not 2020 presidential electors, no matter their modifiers that they add to the title. The people of Georgia did not vote for them to be electors, nor does the purported position of contingently elected presidential elector exist in the Constitution or federal or state law. And defendants were no more presidential electors simply because they give themselves that title than Martin Sheen was ever president because he was President Bartlett. And then they cite, the citation is see generally, The West Wing, NBC television, September 22nd, 1999. So I love that. And I mean, there was more too, that like, even if you were electors, those still aren't federal officers. Because if you remember, Pete, in Meadows, they ruled that former federal officials aren't covered, right?
And this is all made up. It's all the fancy. It's what happens when the crazy upside down logic of MAGA land and everybody trying to follow, Eastman's theories, or listening to Peter Navarro or Rudy babbling on behind a podium, or Sidney Powell. And they're like, yeah, that's it. And then suddenly that fantasy world collides with reality, and you get rulings like this. It's like, no, you know, it doesn't matter what title you give yourself.
In the 80s, I was president of the Jason Bateman fan club, Phoenix chapter. So if I ever get arrested, I'll say, presidential immunity. I was the president of the Jason Bateman fan club, Phoenix chapter. So because of the decision in US v. Trump, I'm immune. This is all official acts because everything I did was as the president of that fan club, and I have presidential immunity. That's what they're asking for. It's hilarious to me.
It truly, truly is. And so now, okay, so that's the Georgia fraudulent electors, adding on to Meadows and Jim Jordan. But we're not done. We're not done because let's stay in Georgia. And this time, Jeffrey Clark's court loss. Now, this is also from the 11th Circuit, and reading from their opinion, we divide our discussion in two parts. First, we explain that Section 1442A1 does not provide Clark, as a former official, a right of removal to federal court. Second, we explain that the issue, whether the special purpose grand jury proceeding was removable, is moot. As we explained in Meadows, the text and history of the removal statute make clear that the statute applies only to current, quote, officers of the United States, unquote, 28 U.S.C. 1442A1. Clark does not argue that he is a current federal officer. So under Meadows, which we're bound to follow, dumbass, that doesn't say dumbass, he is ineligible to seek removal. We affirm the order, remanding Clark's criminal action to state court and denying his request to remove the special purpose grand jury proceeding. So, and again, beyond the crazy arguments that, if Meadows has the best shot of any of these folks and he didn't make it, Jeffy, you're not gonna make it either. And I just, poor thing. He is yet another reason to look forward to whatever comes in the future in Georgia, because, at least in these state proceedings, whoever wins the presidential election isn't going to have the ability to completely stifle them. They may slow them down yet more, but Jeff Clark, however long it takes, your time is eventually coming.
Yeah, and we'll see what the Supreme Court says about this in the Meadows case, right? Because you and I talked about this, that the Supreme Court might actually overturn the idea that the 11th Circuit has put forth, that this this only covers current officials. They might say no, it also covers former officials. And where that does not help Meadows, because even if he was considered an official, and this is what they wrote in their opinion, no executive branch employee, chief of staff of the President of the United States, has any function, providing oversight of state-administered elections. Now, Jeffrey Clark might, as a member of the Department of Justice. So this thing is far from over, but we still got a good bench slap out of it this week. And one more case in Georgia. You know that last week, Judge Cox shot down all 7 of the Trump-controlled Georgia State Election Board's last-minute rule changes. Well, of course, the RNC appealed that ruling, but the very conservative Georgia Supreme Court said no. Here's their order. This is the entirety of their order. Quote, extraordinary motion denied. All the justices concur. End quote. That's all it says. So, whoopsh, another good old bench slap from this time the conservative Georgia Supreme Court.
Yeah, and it's, at least going the right way in Georgia. We'll see. I think they still have a lot of shenanigans up their sleeve. I'm sitting here in Virginia watching Glenn Youngkin trying to appeal DOJ's action, saying, no, you can't actually go striking all these voters from the rolls within the 90-day or whatever, however many day cool-off period it is that he violated. But it's just extraordinary to see all of these efforts made across the United States to make it harder for people to vote, because that's one thing we should be doing in our democracy is make it hard to vote. Let's whatever the process is, let's complicate it. And that's exactly what's going on. But I'm glad.
Yep. It's a 90-day quiet period.
Yeah. That's
under the Voter Registration Act of 1993, I believe. That's off the top of my head. If I need a correction, please send one in.
I think that's right.
All right. We have covered all the bench slaps. We've covered them for Meadows, Jeff Clark, the Georgia fraudulent electors, the RNC, Jim Jordan. Next, we're going to go over the court losses for the state of Florida and a potential probe into Jared Kushner. But first, we have to take a quick break. Yeah, so everybody stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. We have more Hall of Fame patrons to thank, including David in Brooklyn, Janine Iorga, Pete's new catchphrase, you've been thunderstruck, Meg Alexander, Veterinary for America 2024, The Tyrant We Deserve, Mitchell, Jeffrey Kincher, don't memory hold the sacrifices Americans made for each other during the pandemic. It's a once-in-a-generation display of true patriotism. Mr. Half Speed, ATX Polar Bear, Ren, Special K, Kedu, Deborah Kirby, Laura Saba, and Christine G. Passion. Thank you so much for your support. All right, Pete. So Politico writes that Florida's Republican Attorney General has asked a judge to stop the Justice Department from blocking the state's investigation into Ryan Routh. That's the man charged with attempting to assassinate former President Donald Trump. Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody filed the complaint last Wednesday in federal court against Merrick Garland. It marks the latest escalation in a turf war between the FBI and Florida over the alleged crime from September 15th, which happened at Trump's golf course in West Palm Beach, located about 20 miles north of Mar-a-Lago. Governor Ron DeSantis, who unsuccessfully ran against Trump in the Republican presidential primary, set the Florida investigation in motion through an executive order on September 17th. It asked agency officials overseen by Moody to launch their own probe to assemble state charges against Routh.
Yeah. Now, Moody alleges in her 18-page complaint that the Department of Justice subsequently indicated in a letter that Florida had to suspend its investigation, citing a federal law governing the prosecution of crimes against major public figures, which has a section about federal officials superseding local or state investigations until federal action is terminated. The law also says that federal officials can ask state officials for assistance. But Moody notes that at the time when the state investigation launched, federal prosecutors had leveled federal illegal gun possession charges against Routh, but not the attempted assassination charge, which came roughly a week later and carries a maximum penalty of life in prison. Quote, in conversations with federal officials and in subsequent correspondence, these officials have stated that Florida may not conduct its own investigation, may not interview witnesses, and may only cooperate with the federal government's investigation, Moody wrote.
Yeah, and once the superseding attempted assassination charges were filed, U.S. Attorney Mackenzie LaPointe sent a letter to Moody, that's the AG down in Florida, again asking the state to back down until the federal prosecution ends. Moody argues in the complaint that the law doesn't prevent state officials from investigating such crimes and that it's a violation of the 10th Amendment, which prohibits federal government from taking states' power. She wants a federal judge to make a determination or declare the actions unconstitutional. If the state waits to investigate, then evidence, quote, disappears, memories fade, and Florida has no way to force the federal government to cooperate in the state's prosecution, she wrote. Every day that Florida is prevented from investigating, the state's case becomes harder to prove at trial. Moody's complaint lists a litany of alleged problems with federal agencies, including the fact that the federal filings show Routh had been in the area for 12 hours and that the Secret Service had allowed a gunman to get close to Trump for the second time this year, following another assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania in July that left an attendee at the former president's rally dead. A Department of Justice spokesperson declined to comment. After Moody sent a letter to the DOJ in late September asking for cooperation, Garland said that the agency would spare no resource to ensure accountability in this matter, and that prosecutors and agents were working around the clock to discover the necessary evidence to ensure accountability.
Yeah. Now, Moody and DeSantis have questioned the FBI's ability to aggressively pursue the investigation of the alleged assassination attempt, given that the Bureau has investigated Trump in 2 cases that led to felony charges. One of those cases accuses Trump of hoarding classified documents at his Florida club and obstructing their return. The other accuses him of conspiring to try to overturn the 2020 election. Well, so what's the bench slap, you ask? Well, in a gambit to get this in front of Judge Eileen Cannon by filing their lawsuit in Fort Pierce, guess what? The case has been assigned to Judge K. Michael Moore, a George H.W. Bush appointee.
Womp womp.
You know, and again, the point being that this case that is in front of Eileen Cannon, she has fast-tracked it. I mean, completely opposite to what everybody is kind of accustomed to by her behavior with the classified documents trial before she dismissed it. Just the slow, meandering demands for hypothetical briefs about jury instructions, all of that nonsense. None of it exists in her sort of the way she is pursuing the case against Ruth. So it is not compelling in my mind why Florida feels they need this order. It is certainly the kind of thing that tends to, there are conflicts between the federal government in investigations and state and locals. They usually are rarely litigated, and when they are, they lose because the law is pretty straightforward that the federal government does in cases like this have primacy, and this is, nakedly a political stunt by Ron DeSantis and an opportunity to sort of, poke about how the deep state really can't objectively investigate or pursue a case against Trump's would-be assassin. It's all nonsense. It all is a political ploy to generate talking points leading up to the election and presumably after that. But I have little doubt that Florida will be told stop, and the federal case will move forward.
Yeah, my only problem with that kind of thing is that it can be abused, as in Bill Barr having the Southern District of New York tell the Manhattan DA, stop investigating Mike Cohen and stop investigating Donald Trump and his business. We're handling it. And then they sat and did nothing to try to run out the statute of limitations. But what they failed to consider was a once in a century pandemic that would toll the statute of limitations and allow the case to be opened up again. And so that's why it chaps my hide every single time Donald Trump refers to the 34 felony count case as a zombie case because he's the one who killed it.
Yes.
So
100%.
So that can be abused, and I don't know. I mean, I guess that those are the kinds of things that might require litigation to discuss, but it would be impossible to prove, as it was in that particular case. All right, let's talk about another interesting story before we get to the Rudy bench slap of the century. Rep. Raskin and Senator Ron Wyden are urging the Department of Justice to appoint a special counsel to investigate Jared Kushner. This is from the Oversight Committee's website. They say Jamie Raskin, ranking member of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, and Senator Ron Wyden, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, called on Attorney General Merrick Garland to appoint a special counsel to investigate possible violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act by Jared Kushner, son-in-law and former senior White House advisor to ex-President Donald Trump. As part of investigations launched last Congress by House and Senate Democrats, Senate investigators have uncovered that since the end of the Trump administration through mid-2024, Kushner's firm Affinity Partners has received as much as $157 million in fees from foreign clients, including $87 million from the Saudi government, while generating no return on investment, paying zero earnings to investors, and investing only a small fraction of funds it has received from the sovereign wealth funds of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. Public reports indicate Kushner remained politically active throughout that time period, particularly on matters of U.S. foreign policy related to the Middle East. Quote, while on the Saudi government's payroll, Mr. Kushner is simultaneously serving as a political consultant to former President Trump and acting as a shadow diplomat and political advisor to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other foreign principals. Despite being engaged in plainly political activities, Mr. Kushner has not made FARA disclosures to the Department of Justice related to the millions of dollars he receives annually by entities owned and controlled by the governments of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. This is what Raskin and Wyden said in their letter. They go on to say the scale of these undisclosed foreign payments to Mr. Kushner, coupled with the national security implications of his apparent ongoing efforts to sell political influence to the highest foreign bidder, are unprecedented and demand action from the Department of Justice.
Yeah, their letter goes on to say, FARA is designed to ensure that the American public and lawmakers are made aware of foreign efforts to influence U.S. public opinion and political activities, and requires individuals acting as an agent of a foreign principal to register with DOJ. In the letter, Raskin and Wyden cite multiple examples of political activity Kushner engaged in while being paid by the Saudi government and other Gulf states without registering under FARA, in possible violation of federal law, including advising the Saudi Crown Prince on U.S. foreign policy, advising former President Trump in his presidential campaign, selling geopolitical advisory and political advocacy services to foreign government clients through his private equity fund, arranging meetings on foreign policy with the Qatari Prime Minister on U.S. soil, and engaging in political fundraising in support of Trump's campaign and influencing members of Congress on domestic and foreign policy. And again, Allison, not a little bit. You say millions, you're like, oh, million. But no. $157 million from foreign clients.
In fees alone.
More than half of that. $87 million from the Saudi government alone for no return. Zero. No return, no earnings, nada.
Those are just the fees.
Just fees.
That's got nothing to do with the $2 billion, right?
Literally, put it under we should do the math on how big $3 billion in $100 bills would be. But put it under your mattress and you would get the same return on investment that Jared Kushner's firm, Affinity Partners, has earned. Unbelievable.
Right. And I like that they're pointing at just the fees alone, because there might be, from that $2 billion, there might be stuff that's earned, there might be payouts to investors, but that just 150 plus million in fees, that's just a fee. So those aren't investments, but they're paid directly to Kushner for nothing else other than it's a fee. So yeah, we'll see if the DOJ does anything. They might already be doing something. Again, we never know if the Department of Justice is investigating or not until we know. Sometimes that can take weeks, months. I think it took me 6 months to get clues that Merrick Garland was investigating Trump. Because he appointed Wyndham in December and then started having to go around the FBI, having to go around that D'Antuono guy to get search warrants executed on Jeffrey Clark and John Eastman and Scott Perry's phone. So he had to use the Inspector General agents to get those search warrants executed.
Folks, right? I think.
Yes, he used the post office cops to get those executed. And we were all sort of Andy and I were like, why isn't he just using the FBI? Well, turns out Trump holdovers at the FBI. We're not doing it. So that was when I first, at the end of 2021, I first got the glimpse. And then 2 years later, we get reporting in the Washington Post that the week he got to the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland started investigating Trump. And he put together something he called the investigations unit. And he tried to keep it as secret as he could because he didn't want any leaks. And there were only about 6 people in there. But that's when they started. But we didn't know that until years later. So, if the Department of Justice, they could already be investigating Kushner. And usually when we hear Pete, right, it's because one of Kushner's lawyers will say, we got a target letter, or a witness in the case will say, I've been subpoenaed. And then we kind of have a clue, which we haven't seen any of that kind of overt investigatory stuff happen. We haven't heard from any lawyers in that particular case. So we'll keep an ear out and we'll keep you posted on that. Now, we do have some really great Rudy stuff to tell you about, but we have to take one last quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. Our final group of Hall of Fame patrons to thank includes, boy, would I love to be the bus driver. AG promises her next tour will be Baltimore. Nathan Dorn, a dinosaur in dental school. Clover's Tree 73. Charles Jones, Lisa Rollison. January 20, baby. Al Marinen, Joan Qualls, Maria Tovar, Scott Griggs, and Kirkland J. Bateman. Thank all of you so much. Oh, nope, one more. Devil went down to Georgia. He was looking for an election to steal. He was in a bind. He was way behind by 11,780 votes. Did not mean to drop you off. You just rolled over to the next page. Thank all of you so very much for your support. Absolutely critical to putting this together. Humbled by your support. And thank you so much for being part of the team. And as promised, as foreshadowed, as hinted at, as teased, sometimes the snow comes down in June. Sometimes the stars go round the moons. Just when I thought the time had passed, you went and saved the best for last. Let's go over the ruling on Rudy Giuliani's stuff. A federal judge on Tuesday ordered former Donald Trump attorney and New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani to turn over all his valuable possessions and his Manhattan penthouse apartment to the control of Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, the Georgia election workers he defamed and to whom he now owes $150 million.
Can we have a party at Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss's new place?
If they threw one, I would go. No doubt about it. I'm there. Yeah, this is from the ruling. For the following reasons, defendant is ordered under CPLR 5225 to transfer all personal property specified in the list below, and it's a glorious list, at pages 16 through 18, including cash accounts, jewelry, and valuables, a legal claim for unpaid attorney's fees, and his interest in his Madison Avenue co-op apartment to a receivership established pursuant to CPLR 5228 within 7 days. The list of defendants' personal property at pages 16 through 18 includes all items and interests enumerated by plaintiffs in their proposed order and memorandum at docket number 11, with the exception of the 3 World Series rings. With plaintiffs' consent, their claim to defendants' World Series rings is deferred pending resolution of the separate claim by intervener Andrew H. Giuliani as to the rings' ownership. And this is where it, So first, the defendant's Palm Beach condominium, the Palm Beach condo, is the subject of a separate declaratory judgment action. The declaratory action commenced by plaintiffs.
Yep. So I guess Andrew Giuliani is like, those are going to go to me. So those rings. So I want to say they're mine. I don't think he's going to win that. And the hearing actually took place on Monday as we're recording this. I haven't seen yet, at least, any ruling on that. But that's when the hearing was. Now, plaintiffs, the ruling goes on to say that plaintiffs are judgment creditors. That's Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. They are the beneficiaries of a judgment in the amount of $145,969,000, plus post-judgment interest at the rate of 5.01% per year, along with costs, plus attorney's fees, entered in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia against Rudy Giuliani on December 18th, 2023. Merry Christmas. The United States District Court for the District of Columbia also granted the plaintiff's motion to dissolve a federal rule of civil procedure 62A's automatic 30-day stay of an execution and granted leave for plaintiffs to register their judgment in any other district in the United States. Now, you remember they wanted to do that before their ruling. And the judge was like, just do it all after it, all at the same time. So they did, and they got that granted. On December 21st, 2023, the day after the D.C. District Court lifted the stay of execution and permitted the plaintiffs to register their judgment in any other district, Rudy Giuliani filed voluntary Chapter 11 petition in the United States Bankruptcy Court the next day. On August 30th, 2024, so now we're talking 8 months later, almost 9 months later, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss commenced the declaratory action, which seeks a declaratory judgment pursuant to Title 28 U.S. Code, Section 2201, that they established a valid lien on Rudy's Palm Beach condo on August 8th, 2024.
Now, though the appointment of a receiver under Section 5228 is left to judicial discretion, a receiver should only be appointed when a special reason appears to justify one. Factors that the court may consider in ordering a receivership include 1, alternative remedies available to the creditor, 2, the degree to which receivership will increase the likelihood of satisfaction, and 3, the risk of fraud or insolvency if a receiver is not appointed. Appointment of a receiver may be particularly appropriate where, quote, the property interest involved is tangible, lacks a ready market, and presents nothing that a sheriff can work with at an auction, unquote. Defendant does not challenge the notice given him, nor does he challenge the fact of his ownership interest in the property on the enumerated list at pages 16 through 18. Setting aside the ownership of the World Series rings, the questions before the court are 1, whether to order receivership of the Palm Beach condo pending the resolution of the issue of the Florida homestead exemption, and 2, how to structure or limit receivership order with respect to the enumerated items of personal and real property.
All right. So what the judge is saying here is that if, particularly with a factor 2, right, which is the degree to which receivership will increase the likelihood of satisfaction of the judgment. And in this particular case, when you've got like real estate or jewelry or, specific kind of specialty items involved, they would fetch a lot less at an auction. And you kind of need a pro to come in and, to sell a piece of property like a Madison Avenue apartment. And so that's kind of, this is what you just heard is sort of the judge's argument as to why, we aren't just going to let them go to auction with these things through a sheriff's office. We're going to put these things in a receivership so they can be sold for the most amount of money so that we can get closer to the 100. We're not going to reach 148 million, but we can get closer to it. With a receiver in this particular case. And I think that was the justification, all that stuff that you just heard there. Now, she goes on to say the court finds that all of the items and interests listed in pages 16 through 18 should be subject to turnover and receivership in order to ensure that the liquidation of the transferred assets is accomplished quickly and consistently by the plaintiff's chosen counsel, maximizing the sale value of the unique and intangible items and therefore increasing the likelihood of satisfaction of the plaintiff's judgment. So that's what I said. Defendant testified under oath at the meeting of creditors in his bankruptcy case that he is owed about $2 million by either Trump 2020 presidential campaign and the Republican National Committee. This is the kind of the cool part of this judgment here. The defendant, Rudy Giuliani, requested that the court postpone the turnover of the Trump campaign claims for unpaid legal fees until November 6th, the day after the election, expressing concerns that the plaintiffs, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, might use this assignment for improper purposes, quote, creating a confusing and inaccurate appearance, generating and accompanying an unnecessary media frenzy, right? Election interference, basically. The profound irony manifest in the defendant's alleged concern is not lost on the court. By his own admission, the defendant defamed the plaintiffs by perpetuating lies about them. Defendant's lies cast unwarranted doubt on the integrity of the ballot counting in Fulton County, Georgia, in the immediate wake of the 2020 presidential election. Plaintiffs are entitled as a matter of law to pursue any outstanding interest of the defendants in satisfaction of their judgment, including contingent, future, and intangible interests, so long as they are assignable. The court finds that transfer and receivership is appropriate here, as it will allow the plaintiffs to stand in the defendant's shoes with respect to the Trump campaign in order to effectively pursue the claim. So this is the judge, Pete, I'm right. Am I right in my understanding that this is the judge saying that $2 million debt is now something that Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss can go after Trump and the RNC for?
That's under the receivership. Yes, that's
so
exactly
cool.
that debt is now theirs, not Rudy's, which is in fact cool. It continues getting to the specific parts. It says, with respect to the other enumerated items of personal property at pages 16 through 18, defendant requests that the items be turned over to a receiver to hold but not sell certain unique items until after the D.C. Circuit rules on defendant's appeal. Defendant includes in this list items with the level of public interest, e.g., a watch gifted in response to the 9/11 attacks by the President of France, items characterized as collectibles, e.g., a 1980 Mercedes previously owned by Lauren Bacall, and items with sentimental value, e.g., a watch belonging to defendant's grandfather. Defendant's argument with respect to each of these categories is that these specific items are unique. Therefore, if the property is sold and the D.C. Circuit reverses the defamation judgment, defendant will not be made whole even if the value of the items is returned to him.
Yeah, and this is where I actually thought that the judge might allow these things to be held until the appeal was over.
Yep. But he then, and I thought the same thing, he noted defendant had the ability, had he chosen to exercise it, to seek a stay of the sale of his assets to satisfy the judgment. Federal Civil Procedure 62B permitted him to post a supersedious bond in the District of Columbia to stay enforcement of the judgment pending the disposition of his appeal. In the absence of the posting of a bond or the provision of some alternative means of securing the judgment acceptable to the court in which the judgment is entered, a judgment creditor is entitled to enforce the judgment. Defendant did not file a bond or post any other form of security. He chose instead to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy the next day, but that action has not been dismissed and plaintiffs are entitled to enforce their judgment. Having eschewed his opportunity to post security in the District of Columbia, defendant cannot achieve through a broad ruling by this court the very stay of execution that he did not obtain from that court. Now, that's been waiting on that list on pages 16 through 18. Let's go. This is almost, but not quite as good as the canteen lists in Florida or New Hampshire that we've read, or Connecticut, that we've read before. But it includes the shares evidencing defendant's interest in 45 East 66th Street, all rights and interest in and cause of action for fees owed to Mr. Giuliani for services rendered in 2020 and 2021 to former President Trump's presidential campaign and the RNC, the non-exempt cash in the checking accounts held at Citibank N.A. with account numbers ending in 1428 and 5812, a Mercedes-Benz model SL500, model year 1980, various items of furniture, television, sports memorabilia, signed Reggie Jackson picture, signed Yankee Stadium picture, signed Joe DiMaggio shirt, costume jewelry. I'm just going to pause and let that sink in. Costume jewelry. Diamond ring, 2 Bulova watches, 5 Shinola watches, 1 Tiffany & Company watch, 1 Seiko watch, 1 Frank Muller watch, 1 Graham watch, 1 Corium watch, 1 Rolex watch, 2 IWC watches, 1 Invicto watch, 2 Breitling watches, 1 Raymond Weil watch, 1 Baum and Mercer watch, finally 6 additional watches, and any additional properties may be ordered by the court upon motion of receivers or other judgment creditors of defendant, which I think that they may identify. So if they go out and say, hey, we found additional assets, we want you to add to this, that kind of is a catch-all at the end to add to that. But that's what Rudy's got to give up. And I'm sorry, some of the, come on, man, how many watches does a man need? And maybe it's just because
I don't know what the 6 other watches are, because they named the brands of all those other ones down to Breitling.
His Casio G-Shock. Yeah. I have no idea. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, his Seiko. What do you got? One of those calculator watches.
Yeah, exactly. I had one of those. Way back nerd that I was back in 1981 or something with the tiny little buttons.
Of course you did.
Of course I did.
Amazing. So, yeah, I didn't know that when you file for bankruptcy, if you fail to file a stay of execution of the award, or if you fail to put forth a bond, that you have eschewed all of your chances to hold these items. So they can sell them immediately, or have the receivership oversee the sale of these items, and they won't be sold at auction, so they'll get top dollar for them.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like, when that auction is going to occur. I would hope, if Shea and Ruby are going to have a party, hopefully they do a party in and around the auction of these items, because I think, turn into a festive event, do something like, designate one of those 6 other watches to go to the, the Harris Walls. Some, I guess the campaigns will all be over at that point, but I'm curious to see what these various things fetch at auction, or however they're sold. Converted.
Me too. And if anybody is in New York and you got some sidewalk chalk and you want to leave a goodbye message in front of 45 East 66th Street, I don't know, just an idea. Anyway, that's our show. We got through all the bench slaps. We got through the Rudy, 2 turntables and a microphone. Mm-hmm. And gosh, what is the show gonna be like next week? Election week.
Yeah, well, Steve Bannon is out now. I have no doubt that he's immediately going to begin spewing violent rhetoric and encouraging people to revolution and promising retribution and turning up the temperature even more. So, yeah, next week is the last one. We're going to tape it before the election. You're going to hear it afterwards. So, all coming to a head here.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have a winner by the time the next show airs on Wednesday, but we might. I don't know. Everything's just sort of up in the air. So make sure you do everything you can. Vote, check your registration, take friends with you. I think I may have said this on the bonus episode. I know I've talked about this on the Beans, and I know I spoke about it with Andy on Jack, but my favorite thing to do is hold everybody hostage in a group text message, because you can't leave those conversations, and just keep texting them until they all show me a picture of their ballots or their I voted stickers, and then I let them all off the hook and stop texting in the group text. Whatever I can do to help, do the same wherever you're at, and we'll see you next week. Any final thoughts, Pete?
No, get out and vote. Went and voted this weekend, and like you were saying, not just yourself, but if you can find people who might be on the fence who need help, those are the folks to help out. Still plenty of time to volunteer, to do phone banks, to do texting, to do voter outreach. Plenty of time left. So get out there and do it. If you're feeling antsy, don't feel antsy, go out and do something, because that'll take up time and give you a feeling of that you're actually doing something productive rather than doom scrolling all the latest polls on Twitter.
Yeah, and mobilize.us makes it really, really easy. Like, it's really easy to join a text bank or a phone bank, and they make it super simple. I was, up to LA on the train. There was a woman sitting next to me who was returning from San Diego, who lived in LA, and she had gone down to bring her college son's ballot to him at SDSU, and had him fill it out, and he marked, voted blue all the way down the ballot, and she was bringing it back up with her to mail or hand in, and she showed it to me, and she was really excited. So she's like, the whole reason I took the trip down was because they mailed his ballot to our house, and I wanted to get it to him, make sure he had it. So it was his first election that he got to vote in. So very cool seeing stories like that all over the place. All right, everybody, we'll be back in yours next week. We'll have a bonus episode for you this weekend. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks to our Hall of Fame patrons. We couldn't do this without you. We'll see you next time. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.